everyone. This is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, May 10th of 2026. Now, first of all, I want to say to all the moms, happy Mother's Day. This is one of my favorite times of year. We've got the spring in full bloom. We get to celebrate all the beautiful women who are mothers, our own mother, ourselves, our daughters who are mothers, our sisters who are mothers, the friends, and all of the beautiful women who create life and bring these beautiful children into the world. And I know that it is very, very special for me because not only was I born to a beautiful woman who had 11 natural children, 3 adopted, but I was born on Mother's Day. And I've shared this before, but she always made me feel so extra special. And she made all of us feel special. If you consider the amount of children that my mother raised, of course, along with my dad, they were very involved together. But she did a spectacular job of just making us all feel loved and important. And this is such a beautiful time to think about our moms and shower them with love and all of the things. So happy Mother's Day to all the beautiful moms out there. Now, I've had the last few weeks, I've done a really fun thing where I've answered a lot of your questions, and that's been really, really fun. And I've had this last month of lots of journaling, lots of interesting thoughts. And so I'm going to roll this week back to kind of my normal programming, if you will, because I've had some really interesting thoughts about the word judgment. And I'm actually really grateful that I have waited a whole month to really bring this in because it's given me some really deep reflection. And I think that it's going to be really interesting for you to kind of hear what I dug into around the way we judge others as humans. And all of us do it. So here's where I started. Okay. So judgment. And this is because of, some things that were happening in my life where I feel like I was being judged harshly. And it's always interesting because even at the age that I am, I think, why do I let my feelings get hurt when I know I'm making a right decision for myself and others judge me for it? So it's just fascinating. So this is what I wrote about almost a month ago. Judgment. This is a loaded word. Okay. The big question is why? And this is what I really wanted to dig into. Why do we all judge? And then I wrote this, so many reasons. There's religious reasons, cultural, medical. The simple idea of judgment is programmed into us. That's what I think. Okay. So we judge what others wear, what they weigh, how tall they are, how religious or not religious, what they say, what they do, how they act. We judge how they dance, how they breathe, how they chew. I mean, I think of all these things that I have judged and been judged for. We judge every little thing, right? And simply participate in life, we judge it all, right? Unless you walk a mile or a decade or 2 or 3 in someone else's shoes, your judgment is your own problem. And that is kind of the basic that I came down to. And I kind of had my moment as I was working through these feelings of judgment that I was getting from others. And there was actually some, and I think this is common. This is common. And I went down this great rabbit hole of how judgment of others started. It was really kind of a cool month of researching, reading, and really just sitting still with my inner self and being reflective. Okay. So your judgment is your own problem, not my problem. And then I wrote Let Them. And of course, there was a really good book that came out a couple years ago from Mel Robbins, and it was called Let Them. Me and my sisters were reading it, and it's kind of the same thing. And then I wrote, What others think of me is none of my business. And this, of course, takes me to always, I love the 4 agreements. One of them is something like that. What others think of you is none of your business. I don't know if that's exactly it, but that has always been a really powerful thing to think of is that like if I'm doing something that's that's congruent with me, my own growth, my own awareness, and I share it, and others judge me for it, it's it's their issue. It's really fascinating, right? So then I wrote this. I know, easier said than done, right? I think back on my life journey so far and all the moments I judged others. I really had to think I am not, okay, I was feeling really, really judged, and I still have, I've made some really big changes in my life, even recently in the last 6 months, and I've been judged for it, and it's okay. You really kind of go, it's okay. And so as I'm reflecting, I think back on my life journey so far and all the moments I judged others, okay? I judged people who weren't the same religion. This was when I was very small. I judged others in my religion because they didn't follow the rules as well as I did or my family did. You know, um I realized it a lot of these things we judge others for is literally because we watch our parents, we watch our congregation members, we watch our teachers, we watch our fellow students, we watch other people judge when they're different. So, and then I reflected on this. I started teaching group exercise when I was 18. And looking back in my mind, I was always judging others. I was really just reflecting on all the things and all the times, which is so many and so multiple. And I'm sure many of you who are listening to this can relate, right? I judged what they wore, how much they weighed, how much they had to lose, all the things. Of course, you know, it's really fascinating to be in the industry where I'm super comfortable in the gym, but there's a lot of judgment going on in there as well. So all the things, way too long. I feel like I did that for way too long. I definitely have found myself in a place, and then what I wrote next is compassion. Compassion and seeing intent and the spirit and the soul became my normal. Okay, so it took self-awareness and growth. And I think what's interesting is um, it's made this journey into making decisions that are best for me, that others might judge. Um, like when I left my childhood religion, it was more than 30 years ago. And I was okay with the judgment that I got. And I think this is where you must step into someone else's shoes before you can judge. At least judge it harshly where you cut them off or whatever. In fact, I have a really dear friend. She's been a friend for 30 years. And about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, she reconnected. She's my age, she's a couple years older. She reconnected with an old boyfriend, like from when she was very young, like in her 20s. And he had moved on, gotten married, had kids, and then his wife left him. And my friend reconnected with him. And I remember the conversations that we had as far as she harshly judged the wife leaving this amazing human that she had reconnected with. They were having so much fun. Everything was grand and great. And it lasted for, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years, maybe. And then out the other side of that, it became, I see exactly why his marriage. And that might not be the best example, but when someone has especially a path of growth and where there's an evolving of our spirit, our soul, everything that I think we came here to experience and learn and evolve. When someone evolves out of religious things, cultural things, medical things, the programming, when we evolve out of that, it's easy to catch judgment. Okay. So what I decided to do is like, what is the history of judgment? Why did human beings start judging each other? And it was interesting, some of the things that I discovered. Okay. So I'm excited to share this with you because this changes everything because we realize that judgment is now amplified. So I've got all this written down in this is such an interesting way to look at it. So there is an origin to human judgment. Okay. So what I found is this: humans evolved to judge quickly for pure survival. Okay. The main questions we ask ourselves, is this person safe and are they part of my group? Okay. Because if you think about human beings way back thousands of years ago when we were first around, we were in small groups of 50 to 150 approximately. And there's different, sometimes smaller than that. But it was like, is when you meet someone new, is this person safe? And are they part of my group? Okay, so this was survival. So judgment started as fast pattern recognition. So you're looking for a pattern to see if someone is safe and to see if they belong. Okay, not morality. The origin of judgment was for survival. It was not for morality. Okay, think about that. And this was really, when I discovered that piece, I was like, that makes so much sense. Okay. And there was also a social function. So as groups grew, judgment enforced rules and cooperation. Okay, so we're not still now talking about morality. We're talking about a way for society to function, to enforce rules and cooperation. So it became a tool for this, maintaining order, rewarding behavior, and then punishing deviation. Okay, so if someone did something bad to someone else, judgment was a way to punish deviation from the rules that kept society good, right? And then there's a cultural layer. So judgment expanded into these things: appearance, language, behavior, and it signaled this: I belong to this group. Okay, you dress the same as everyone, you go to the same um, gathering, you sing the same songs, and you're signaling that you belong. And as humans, we want to belong, and we've always wanted to belong, way a long time ago. And then what happened, and this is really cool in the history because this makes so much sense. There was a religious amplification of judgment. So religion, it raised the stakes. Okay, the actions were tied to eternal consequences. So think about that. In the actions that someone now takes and I get to judge others for, now had eternal consequences, not just what's going to happen if I don't belong to this group and I don't know how I'm going to survive and eat and sleep and be safe. Now the consequences are eternal, which that raises the stakes more than any of us, I think, were prepared to comprehend. And then morality became absolute. Okay? Judgment became this: a moral duty and a sense of truth. Beliefs fused with identity, and then disagreement feels threatening. Okay, so when someone disagrees with you, now it's threatening, because now you're threatening not just this life existence, you're now threatening my eternal salvation or my eternal consequences. That is such a massive weight. Okay, and then there's a psychological core to judgment. So being judged, it triggers fear of rejection. Okay, nobody wants to be rejected. Nobody. Rejection historically equaled danger. Okay, this creates shame. Not I did wrong, but I am wrong. Okay, now that's a big shift. That's a big shift in what we judge for. Okay, and then this is how the loop forms. Okay, this is really interesting. First, you are judged, then you feel shame and you feel a threat, then you adapt to stay accepted. Okay, you internalize these standards and you judge others the same way. And then everyone becomes not just the judge, we become judged. So it's just this loop. It's just this loop. And we adapt. We sometimes deny our mission, we deny our experience, we deny our purpose when we adapt to stay accepted into our group. I mean, how many I've done that many times. Okay, and there's a really beautiful way. Like I'm going to weave compassion here in the end, because this is really where everything gets to shift. And then here's some core reasons why we judge others. We do it to reduce uncertainty, to protect our identity, to feel secure, like I'm okay. We do that to feel secure, like I'm going to judge them because I need to make sure I'm okay. And if I judge them, I'm okay. Okay. And we do it to resolve internal attention, and then we do it sometimes to gain status, right? And then this is really where I realized what makes this so crazy in today's world is that our modern world with all the technology, it amplifies it. So the modern world amplifies judgment because there doesn't have to be context. There doesn't have to be depth. We don't have to know the history of someone that we've been in the same group with, because this group might be online. It might be someone we follow on social media. Okay. So here's what we get in our modern crazy world: constant comparison. And that's like, we don't even know these people and we're comparing ourselves to them, right? Less content, less context, and faster, harsher judgments. Faster and harsher. And then here's a crazy thing to think about. We get a social reward for being outraged. There's a social reward for that. It's all over social media. I think social media has really evolved into something so crazy, so crazy. And then the hardest thing is that there's a permanent record of your mistakes. I mean, I feel so grateful that I was raised even before the internet. And my sons who are in their 40s will say they feel so grateful they were also raised all through their childhood and their teens prior to the internet. They're so grateful for that because there's no permanent record of all the stupid things they might have said, done, or posted that others will now judge you into eternity or into the very end of your lifetime, right? Because there's always a permanent record. That's crazy. And then this, our identity becomes performative. You know, this is something that I really, um, I realized throughout this whole month of journaling and really reflecting on judgment that the most important thing for me to do in this lifetime is to stay true to who I am, the growth I've experienced, the awareness that I have, my um, my ability to have a platform to share. And if others choose to judge me for my own journey, then it's really okay. I'm not the one for them to tune into and maybe get a little pop of inspiration or a little aha moment from. And this is where that whole thing about conforming and staying on the path so that we won't offend others. Like I'm not gonna, I don't want to do that. You know, I've had a lot of growth in these last 4 years since I've been doing my Sunday Message of Love. And I haven't looked back on any of them, but it would probably be really interesting to go back because I know I've had a lot. I've had some interesting stuff. And a lot of you have been along this journey with me. And I thank you for that because I think we've experienced a lot of really cool shifts and awareness and evolving and growth similarly and together, right? So here's the problem with the modern system. It's overstimulated and it's amplified. Okay. So what's underneath everything? This is what I found. There are some core things that are underneath everything. There is a human need for belonging. That is a core. That's a core, something that we need. Okay. And there's also a core fear of rejection. And then there's a core pain, and that is shame. So those things, there's a core issue underneath all of this, right? So judgment is a strategy to manage all three of these. When we judge, we can belong, we can no longer be rejected, and we can stamp down our shame. Okay? So those are core, these are core issues, right? And then here's how I'm going to wrap all this up, okay? Because I thought, well, how do we step out of this loop? This is a loop, right? So we don't do it by eliminating judgment, okay? But by changing our relationship to it, okay? Because this is a core of how humans have evolved, especially in a social structure, in cultural structures, even religious structures. This is a core of who we are. So the goal is not to eliminate judgment, but it's about changing our relationship to it. So here's what I wrote. We need to notice judgment instead of instantly believing them. When you see someone who, like my friend, uh, who, you know, immediately judged the woman who left her husband, um, after all those years and raising their kids and all of that, she didn't live any, she didn't live in that woman's shoes. We don't live in other people's shoes. So I think we need to notice when we're judging rather than just jump into a conclusion. I would say, unless you have lived in someone else's shoes and you've experienced the nuances of any experience that they've had, any experience, whatever it may be, you know, it. So we need to notice a judgment instead of instantly believing them. That is critical. And then we need to add context instead of jumping to conclusions. That's a super important. We might need to do a little bit of research. In fact, I have one of my dearest, closest sisters, lives near me. She's almost 20 years younger than me, and because she lives near and she has two young daughters who are the same age as my grandkids, we are very close because I see her kids all the time. And she is one of those people who knows how to look for context before she judges. And she's always been this way. I think this is a gift of hers. She's kind of a sleuth. Like, she wants to know, why did this happen? I'm not going to believe it until I know what's behind it. Like, that is such a good, like, I have learned so much from her. And it's a really beautiful thing to get context before you just jump to a conclusion. And then we need to separate behavior from identity. Like, think about that. Someone else's behavior, it doesn't mean that is their permanent identity. We all do things that we regret or that we wish we'd have done different, or, because we learn, we grow, we make mistakes. It's all part of it. And then we need to reduce internal harshness. We need to stop being so hard on ourselves, you know, and give ourselves grace. And also, I guess, create a little bit harder shell and be so confident in the choices that you make, especially if you do them with love and compassion. And your intent is not to hurt, but your intent is to continue to grow and be aware. And sometimes when you step out of situations or things or jobs or relationships, it's because you have self-respect. That's why. And if someone judges you for that, they don't know. They don't know all the stuff. So there's a huge role that I believe compassion plays in this whole judgment thing. And after this whole month of really, really, it was such a beautiful month of reflection on the whole judgment thing, that what I realized is that when you put in compassion and you let it play a starring role, everything changes, everything shifts. So it shifts from threat to understanding. Someone believes differently than you, someone dresses differently than you, someone like, you can take this as far as you want to take it. As far as someone believes differently politically. I mean, I think we used to be a lot better about this, where people who were two different political parties, once, they could have a very lively discussion over dinner and then still eat dinner and laugh and be friends and be neighbors. I think that we need to remove the threat, okay? And we need to put it more into understanding. It's okay if someone has a different religious belief than you. What if someone believes in Buddha, they want to be a Buddhist and you want to be a Christian? Like, that's hard. That's hard. That piece is really hard for some people, okay? And when you bring compassion in, it does this. It reduces defensive reactions. You stop being so defensive about the way you believe. Your reactions don't have to be defensive. It sounds easier said than done until you really start practicing it, right? And then what it does is it interrupts the projection. I mean, it interrupts the pattern. So when you throw compassion in there, and I'm not talking about feeling bad for someone else or going, oh, you don't believe the way I do, so I'm just going to have compassion for you and let you believe your little thing. No, it's not about that at all. Because we're all here experiencing the world, some of the same things, but the way we look at the world is completely different. Like if you look back at what happened during COVID, I know people who said they loved that we didn't have the world slowed down a little bit. And I'm not saying they loved all the crazy things that were happening, but they loved that people. It's just interesting because your perspective is so crazily important and it can frame everything. So then when you bring compassion in, it softens shame. There's shame is such a low vibrational frequency. And I will tell you, this is a really good time for me to bring this up as far as the focused life force energy, because shame sits underneath um, the level of 200, which is courage, on the Dr. Hawkins scale of high frequency, the scale of consciousness. And I believe we're here to grow and to learn and to remember who we are. And when you have this technology surrounding you, 2.5 years ago, I put this technology on my home and I put it on my warehouse where we have all of our products, where we process orders. And this has made a big difference. So I jumped aboard and I'm like, I want to help this company. So I'm going to put a link below this in case you want to try it. I know many of you have. I know many of you listening to this have taken me up on this offer. So it's awakenthefield.com. So just click on the link, you get 15 days for free. But the reason I bring this up is because I believe these last 2.5 years has helped expedite my own personal growth in my own field of consciousness and how I want to show up, how I want to live my life, and how I want to evolve my divine spark of pure love and the peace of God that I know that I am, and how I want to get to the end of my life. So to me, shame does not need to be a piece of it on any level at all. So everything underneath 200, which is courage, shame, apathy, guilt, fear, sadness, anger. I'm not saying that you're not going to have those feelings. I'm saying that this helps you realize that you don't need to hang on to them. Maybe you need to feel them. Maybe you need to journal about them. Maybe you need to go talk to somebody and release, especially the feeling of sadness, if you think about that. We all have these really super sad things that happen. We lose people we love. We lose pets we love. Sad things happen in the world. We see what's happening in another country and it makes us sad. It makes us angry. And while we do need to opt out of learning and hearing about everything that's happening, I think we need to be a little bit more, let's get these feelings out and then let's move on, because it doesn't serve us to hang on to them. So when you add compassion, it softens shame. And then what this actually does is it creates a more stable sense of belonging. Because to me, this is super important. When we get judged by someone we love, or people we care about, or people we want to maybe have a positive impact on, and they come back at us with judgment, okay? We feel, oh, I'm messing up my belonging here. I'm messing that up. So this softens that. It creates a more stable sense of belonging. You get to stand stable in where you belong, right? And someone else judging you, it might be they might judge you for a short period of time until they go, okay, well, until they come to their own awareness and their own growth and their own evolution, right? So here's how I'm going to wrap it up. There's a quick summary of thoughts. So it's this: humans judge to stay safe and belong. That system creates shame and defensiveness. And what that does is that leads us to judge others in return. So when we feel judged, we judge others, okay? Modern life intensifies this loop. And then awareness and compassion are how we help to lessen or loosen that grip of judgment. So I do think we need to roll it back to the original origin of why judgment was even put into place, because I think there are some good reasons to judge, but not in the moral sense, not in the religious sense, not in the others dress differently than me sense, not in all those judgy, surfacey things. So I thought this was just a really interesting thing to share with you today, and I'd love to know what you think. So here we are in the almost the middle of May. We have beautiful, beautiful spring weather here in Utah, and I have been working in my yard. I don't think there has been a season that I have ever pulled more weeds. I know that might be a really interesting thing to talk about here at the end, but there has been something so satisfying and so beautiful in making my property. I have a big 3/4 acre piece of property, and it gets a lot of weeds, and I usually get the surface ones, but sometimes I'm overwhelmed by it. But I will tell you something really fascinating. I have not turned on my television since the 1st of October of last year. So I've watched a few things. I've been on YouTube. I've watched a few things on there, but I have not, and I've been to a couple of movies in the theater, but I have decided that I don't want to fill my brain, fill my psyche. I don't want to sit and veg out. And I'm not saying I never will turn on my TV again, but I will tell you, it has made a huge difference in the way that I feel in my body, the way that I'm able to deal with all the energies and the frequencies and the things that are happening in the world that feel out of control, they feel chaotic. We are in life-changing times. We are in humanity-changing times. I believe we are in a time where there's a timeline split, and there are people who are walking a path that isn't it's their path. I don't judge it, and I want to walk on a different path. And one of those things I've realized is when I get in Mother Nature, when I get to make something beautiful, get my hands dirty, make my back a little bit hurt, I get stiff, I sleep really good, I take a hot shower when I'm done, all the good stuff. When I do relax, and I get to be in my beautiful yard, it really, there is something about that that's really magical. So I would love to know what you think about this. An interesting idea to look at judgment, without saying I'm never going to judge again, and just reframing it and putting it into the context. I think that it really started out at its origin, to give us a sense of belonging and really survival. And we don't really have to have survival like those early humans, ancestors of ours, had to survive. But I think we need to get back to our small group and not think we belong to a group that's our permanent group because we're connected to them through a Facebook group, or we're connected to them. There's nothing wrong with those things, because I do think they help us connect to our like-minded souls and friends. We find people, but I think we need to nurture our local communities, the people that we are in person with. Have a cup of coffee, go to lunch with somebody. I actually say one more thing before I end this here, but I have some very dear friends who they're only in town for a short period of time because they travel, they work in another state, but they come in for 4 to 6 weeks in the spring, early spring, or kind of as the winter's ending, and then they come in the fall. And the woman, it's a husband and wife, and the woman came, and Dee, I don't know if you're watching this, but they were here when my yard had exploded with weeds, like, because that's what it does every spring. And we together spent hours and hours out with, and not many people will do this, but she enjoys it as much as I do. And there was something so magical about that period of time where she would actually text me and say, "Hey, are you done with your workday? Can I come over and pick weeds with you?" And it was amazing. So that pulling weeds might not be your jam, but find something, especially outside, that will disconnect you from your technology, from your TV, enough to remember that you're here on this planet. You're a beautiful, divine spark of love and pure light and consciousness, and you are here to make a difference. All of us are. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. I love you all, and we will see you next time.